My name is Jack, and I'm obsessed with all things fish. I'm trying to catch 100 different species of fish from British waters as I fly, course, and sea fish for whatever comes along. This week I'm going after a very elusive species, the brook trout, somewhere in the British Isles. Now I'm being a little bit cloak and dagger here. I do put a lot of work into finding species, and I don't really want to just blurt spots away, especially as often other friends will give me tip-offs and I don't feel it's right to reveal their spots. So all I'm saying is it's in the UK. You'll have to narrow it down from there.
Well, how are we all doing? Today I'm fishing for brook trout. They're a species that I've really wanted to fish for a long time, and I know that they're much sought after by species hunters. I'd kind of discounted going after them, and then I got a tip off that this fishery has got a few brook trout. So, fingers crossed, I've got my fly gear ready. I'm using a little strike indicator and a buzzer, and with a bit of luck, we can catch a brook trout. Let's give it a go.
One of the problems today is that there were a few lakes to choose from, and I knew that there was only a handful of brookies in each one. Although they can get to double figures in the US, here in Britain they're much smaller, so it's likely the rainbows and browns might beat them to the fly.
Right, so the method today is fairly straightforward. I'm just fishing a buzzer with a little strike indicator because the fish are up in the water. Even though it's cold, we're in December, still seeing fish rising, and brook trout are a cold water specialist, so they're not going to be bothered by the temperature whatsoever. In fact, although we call them brook trout, they're a char, they're in the char family. So brook trout used to have a much wider distribution. They were first introduced from America in the 1800s, and at that period of time it was really fashionable to stock weird and wonderful things in the UK. It's how grey squirrels got here and muntjac deer and things like that. So they were relatively common then, and up until the 80s they were still relatively common, but a few things have happened since then. They're more expensive to breed because they're a smaller fish, and they need cooler water, so it became more expensive to stock them. You've also got the case that because they're smaller, they're more liable to predation. So if you've got cormorants or pike in your waterway, these little brook trout, they're only going to get to a couple of pounds, so they're the first ones to go. So you don't want to be spending more money on a fish that is going to get eaten straight away. And especially as they're so aggressive, generally, if there's a lot of them in there, they're relatively easy to catch. I say that with bated breath, but it's not economic to stock fish that are going to get caught straight away. So it kind of fell out of fashion, and what replaced them was a hybrid called the tiger trout. And tiger trout are a mixture of brown trout and brook trout. They get much bigger, they're very aggressive, they're still very pretty fish. In fact, there's tiger trout in this venue as well. So brook trout are pretty much non-existent in trout fisheries, except for this one. So fingers crossed, I can get one.
I cast out, and soon enough a fish hit the fly, bending the rod over.
Let's just have a look at this, which is a rainbow trout. Actually, for a stocked fish, it's really pretty, it's really well spotted. They're normally a bit manky out of lakes, but actually that's not too bad. But it's not the trout we're after, so we'll get it back. The nice thing with fishing a strike indicator is it's a bit like float fishing, so I can just leave the bait in the water longer, or in this case a fly, and when that goes I know a fish has took it. There's a lot of rainbows in here as well. Obviously I had that nice rainbow early on, so I've got to kind of compete with those to get through to the brook trout. Now I mentioned about how rare brook trout are in fisheries, but we do actually have wild populations of brook trout. Now obviously they would have been introduced at some point. As far as I'm aware, there are at least 4 populations that are self-sustaining in the UK. There's one in North Wales, somewhere around that way. There's one, I think, in kind of the Trossachs area of Scotland. There's also one in the Western Highlands and there's one in the islands. The reason I'm not naming specifically where they are is because people get very weirdly protective over these brook trout, and I think it's worth mentioning a couple of things. They're not native, they've got no protection in the UK, and I don't think we should put other people off fishing for them. Oh, hey, whoa! And oh, that was well timed, wasn't it? And also, even though they're not native, oh, lost it, bugger. Oh, that was a nice rainbow. Even though they're not native in the UK, they're not invasive, they don't cause any problems. So, for example, I know one of the populations where you find brook trout, you get brown trout in the bottom lock, and in the top lock it's only brook trout. Where the brook trout are on their own, they thrive, they do really, really well. Where they compete with brown trout, they struggle, they can't compete with them. So they're not a problem, they're not going to take over British rivers, they're not going to be an issue. So I look at brook trout in the UK as a kind of exotic native, I guess, like little owls or mandarin ducks. They're not native, but they don't really cause any issues. And most of those locations as well are really, really remote. I know that 2 of those locations are a good 3-hour walk to get to, so you've got to be really keen on your species to fish for them. Whereas this fishery today, I can see my car, I've had a sausage cob and a cup of tea. This is much more my style of fishing. Rock up and try and catch the species. But I'm yet to get a brook trout yet. I'm a little bit worried because we're in December. At this time of year, we don't have a lot of light, so fingers crossed I can get a brookie.
I was beginning to think I'd maybe made a mistake, but the indicator started to move and I had a fish on, but it felt much smaller, and I saw that flash of red. I knew I'd hooked my target species.
Oh, right, let's have a look at this. A brook trout. I am chuffed to death with that. I was not sure if I would ever catch one of these in the UK. I got a tip off for it. That is absolutely stunning. You can see why it's a member of the char family. That is phenomenal. I am so happy. This is probably one of the best fish I've ever caught in the British Isles. I'm so pleased with that. What a gorgeous looking fish. Get on. We'll get it back.
I wasn't really sure I'd ever get a brook trout, so I was delighted to finally catch one. They are gorgeous fish and they really put up a decent fight for its size. I'm still tempted to maybe go and try for the wild ones at some point, so let me know if you'd like to see that in a future video.
Well, I can't believe that I got a brook trout. That is absolutely incredible. It just goes to show that you shouldn't discount any species. I sort of thought, well, it's never going to happen. They're either too remote or they're just not around anymore. And I ended up catching one, and a beautiful one at that, so I'm chuffed to death with that. So happy to have caught my my first brook trout. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you can subscribe to the channel, it really helps me out. Give it a like and comment down below what species should I go after next. I'll see you in the next vid. Cheers.
I have a range of merch out, including fish posters, playing cards, and an ID book on British fish species, which you can get in the link in the description.
Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed this vid, why not check out this other video right here? If you can, please subscribe to the channel, only takes a couple of seconds and it really helps me out. I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.